as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, seeing a third world country for the first time. Um, and the stuff that goes on there, we were told that we couldn't interfere. Like me and my buddy, we were talking last night about it. Seeing people with burning tires on them and they're screaming, seeing people getting drugged behind vehicles with comm wire, seeing people with their hands chopped off, bleeding, wanting us to help them, and we were told that we couldn't interfere because it's their culture. It was hard.
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that served. I'm joined today by David Willis. He is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, they go untold. Not every Marine story is the same. What is the same is the oath that we all took. This week, I'm honored to have David on the podcast to share a piece of his story. David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a rainy Sunday morning here, Super Bowl Sunday.
Same here. And David, I was on his podcast, gosh, was it a few weeks ago, not too long ago. And anytime there's a Marine, obviously it's like, well, I got to bring you on my podcast. So happy to have you here.
Well,
And
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And I was everybody loved your episode on my podcast. So I'm excited.
I am too. And so the first question we always start with is, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
So when I was growing up, my grandpa, I guess I was probably about the age of 5, 6, somewhere around there. My grandpa, on my mom's side, said, "Well, he's going to go in the military." And as I was growing up, I always knew I was going to go in the military. It was just something that was always on my heart that I was going into the military. And then as I got older and started hearing about the military, different branches, I had family members that were in the Army, and I was like, I want to be the best. And so as I started looking around, and the best was the Marines at the time. Now I don't know about now, but back then, early '90s, the Marine Corps was the best. Had the best commercials, they had everything, and I was like, all right, I'm going to Marines. So, and I had a few friends that joined the Marine Corps, and before I did, and I was, asked them questions and stuff like that, and went into my ASVAB test. I scored a 98 on my ASVAB. So I went and talked to my recruiter, Gunny Groach. I still remember his name, Gunny Groach. And I was like, sign me up. He's like, all right. So he goes, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be infantry. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to do anything else. I said, I want to be infantry because that's the best.
With a 98 ASVAB score.
Yeah, with a 98 ASVAB. He's like, you're stupid. And I was like, well, maybe. But so I went and I was infantry. Went to Paris Island, first battalion at Paris Island, and then went to School of Infantry, and then 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines, Golf Company. So.
And how long were you in the Marine Corps?
So I was in from 97 to 01. So I got out August of 01. And I was on terminal leave. And I had 30, I think I had 30, little over 30 days of terminal leave. And then I was officially EAS'd in September, right before 9/11. And then 9/11 happened, and then I got involuntary recalled. It was the first time the Marine Corps ever activated the individual ready reserves. So I got recalled back in and went to back to Camp Lejeune for combat refresher training, and then they put us with a mobilization support battalion. So, and then I got out the last time in late 03, early 04. So little over 6 years.
So how was your first enlistment? Is that how you would say it? Your first enlistment or first time tour?
Yeah, the first tour. So I deployed a lot. So I was, like I said, I was with 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines Golf Company. Get there, let's see, I get there early 98. Um, yeah, early 98. We deployed to Bridgeport, California first. Went to cold weather training. That was, being fresh out of Kentucky, I never really left the state of Kentucky very much, especially on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and going over there, it it was way different being up in the Sahara Nevadas, and snow. I love snow. I wish Kentucky had more snow. But I loved it. It was fun. Then, I went to Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Was my next deployment as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, seeing a third world country for the first time. Um, and the stuff that goes on there, we were told that we couldn't interfere. Like, me and my buddy, we were talking last night about it. Seeing people with burning tires on them and they're screaming. Seeing people getting drugged behind vehicles with comm wire. Seeing people with their hands chopped off, bleeding. Wanting us to help them, and we were told that we couldn't interfere because it's their culture. It was hard. But overall, my first tour in the Marine Corps, I got out. So I rated E5. But when typical Marine Corps fashion, if you're not re-enlisting, they're not going to promote you
Yeah.
because that billet could go to somebody else. So I got out as a E4 the first time, um, and then I loved it. It was fun. Well, we'll answer that question later, but yeah. So when I got recalled back in, they pinned E5 on me. So technically on paper, I was still an E4, but since I rated E5, the gunny, uh, the gunny that was in charge of us, so we didn't have, typical first sergeant that would be in charge of our company because, like I said, we were mobilization support, so they had a gunny that was the acting first sergeant, even though he was a gunny. Him and the company commander that was we had pinned E5 on me. But I was still, so I got paid. Here's the funny thing. I
I was
got
about to say,
paid.
were you got paid as an
I
E5?
got paid as an E5, but when I got my second DD 214 from that, it was still says I was E4, even though my LES is showing me getting E5 pay. So so officially I was never promoted officially, but I was an E5 for that time that I was in.
That's wild.
Yeah, it was crazy. I didn't know how the reserves kind of worked that out, but
Yeah.
yeah, their admin did something and I got paid for it, so I wasn't
I
gonna.
was about to say, at least you were getting paid for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
How So how much time did you have before you got called back? Because I know you said the dates, but like I'm horrible with like doing math. So how much of a gap between there was there?
Couple months,
So just a
if
couple months.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
It was
that's better than like because
yeah.
I, initially was picturing like, if it's a year or two, how almost it may be more traumatic because as you start processing, like you said, what you went through as an 18, 19-year-old and was seeing, but
Right.
you really didn't have a chance then to even process that
No,
first.
and the funny thing is so when I got out of the Marine Corps the first time, my plan was to do 20 in the military altogether. That was my plan. But if you're in the Marines, if you're infantry, it's so hard to change your MOS if you're infantry. Once you're infantry, you're infantry. It's kind of like super duper hard to get out. So my plan, get out of the Marine Corps the first time. I was already in the process of talking to an Army recruiter, and I had it set up. I was going to go to in Germany for 5 years. I was going to go from E4 to E5, $50,000 enlistment bonus, and I was just going to switch into telecommunications because that's what my stepdad was. He was a telecommunications. He was a E6 or E7. He was an E7, so sergeant first class, if I remember correctly, in telecommunications. So that's what I wanted to do. And 9/11 happened. That got pushed on the back burner. Recruiters like we're going to have to wait. So we waited. I got my Western Union because you always hear about that. If they're going to recall you, you're going to get a Western Union. So I told my mom, I was like, be on the lookout because her address was my home of record. I said, be on
Yeah.
the lookout. that for a Western Union because I'm gonna get recalled because I knew I was. I mean, it was just I was infantry. I was definitely I knew I was getting recalled, and sure enough, about 2.5, 3 weeks later, I got a Western Union that said, "Please report back to Camp Lejeune." Um, so yeah, and then so we put the army thing on the back burner. Went back and did my time that I had left. Got out, talked to the army recruiter again. And it was the same army recruiter. Had everything set up, and at that time is when the military, not just the Marine Corps, but the military said you couldn't have tattoos below your elbow. Like they changed the tattoo policy. Well, I already had the big Grim Reaper that I have here, and the army, the doctor at MEPS denied me from joining the army. And I'm like, dude, here's my two DD-214s with, here's the original waiver that you let me join the Marine Corps with. He goes, I can't let you join. So we took it all the way up to a lieutenant colonel on the over recruiting of over the Eastern Seaboard, and it still couldn't get me in the army. So I was like, but in hindsight, it's 2020, right? My wife, my current wife, told me if I went into the military that she would leave me because she couldn't be a military spouse. And
Which
so
is fair.
right,
And the honesty of it. I mean, that's I think that sometimes like you hear that and you maybe initially be like, no, like the light, like it
yeah,
is.
yeah. But also, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Exactly.
So, like in our situation, you know, higher power decided that I didn't need to go back in the military because I needed to be here to be a father, to be a husband. And I think it was a godsend kind of thing where, I was sitting at home with her working, building a life for ourselves. And, here we are 20, 20 years later, 20 plus years later, we're still married. We got two daughters, one's 17, one's 15, AB students in school. They're both um, they're taking honors classes and AP classes. I got one that my older one, she's taking dual credit classes. She wants to be FBI agent. So she's planning on going into the military and then going into the FBI. Then my youngest daughter, she's wants to be a high school history teacher, but she also wants to go in the military as a combat medic. So and I told my wife a long time ago, I'm never going to discourage my kids from joining the military. If they want to, I'll encourage it, but I also will guide them in the right direction, what's best for them. Like with my oldest, she said, Daddy, I want to be an FBI agent because she loves criminal minds and stuff like that. She wants to do behavioral analysis for the FBI. I'm like, okay, well, if you want to do that, what you need to do is go into the Air Force, get into their security forces, go to college while you're doing this, and become an officer, do all that. Then you'll get recruited either by the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, ATF, whatever, and you just got to figure out what's going to be best for you, but you need to go that route. And then my youngest, she was like, Daddy, I want to be a medic, but I want to be in the Marines. I'm like, well, unfortunately, the Marine Corps doesn't have corpsmen or medics. You would have to go Navy or Army for that. And so, we just got to figure out what's going to be best for her. And she's going to do her time. And then she wants to be a high school history teacher. So,
And I think the point that you made is really, I feel like so many people just aren't properly informed. And that's why military service doesn't seem like an option, or they like don't know it as an option, or they may even
right,
make the wrong choice for them. And that's not a diss on the recruiters by any mean. I worked at a recruiting station, some of the best people I know. My recruiter was my first mentor in the Marine Corps.
right,
But people don't know what they don't know. And in so many schools and with so many parents, it is you're never going to join. So instead of them getting the information they should get and
right,
getting the questions answered that they should, they don't. And so I think that it is awesome that you are, again, not telling them which way, but instead, like, here's the path of like what you're looking at accomplishing. Here are the ways you can and the
Right.
paths you can.
Right.
Still your choice, right? But here,
Yeah.
here's it laid out. And I think that is so important. And especially with like females. And again, I was on the recruiting side of the house, and females are different than men. Like you said, you knew you wanted to be infantry, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
Even with it, whatever, you weren't thinking about what you were going to do after the Marine Corps.
No, I wasn't.
That's not how females are. Females are like, I know eventually I want to do this,
Yeah.
so I'll join the military to do that. And so, and that kind of like brings us to like, so how was your transition? Because here you were, somebody who had a 98 ASVAB and didn't think about what you would do after the Marine Corps. You just knew you wanted to be infantry. How was that transition then when you got out?
So, all right. So the original transition in 2001, it was a little bit rocky because I didn't have a plan when I got out, because my plan was to go in the Army. That was the plan. And talking with the Army recruiter back home in Bardstown, Kentucky, that was my plan. So, I was on my terminal leave, and while I was on terminal leave, I was, already making plans with the Army recruiter, getting everything set up, because to go from the Marine Corps back then into the Army, you had to wait 90 days. That was the waiting period, because they wanted you to get reacclimated to civilian sector. So did my waiting period. Well, I didn't even really have a chance to do my waiting period the first time. So then I got recalled back in, and then when I got out the second time, I was doing, talking to the recruiter again. And the second time, when I got out, I kind of had a plan. I was like, all right, I need to find a job, just something temporary until, I get my orders to go in the Army or whatnot. So I found a factory job. I'm not a indoor kind of guy. I like being outdoor. So working in a factory was pretty depressing, honestly. I mean, I was working third shift, and I had some friends that worked there with me, but it was just, I needed to be outside. I'm an out, and even to this day, like I work for a telecommunications company, so I did wind up going in telecommunications, but I work for a telecommunications company, and I bury lines. I play in the dirt all day long. That's what I love doing. That's what, I'm a hunter, so I love being in the woods and the outdoors, and I work, and when I work outside all day long in the elements. So yeah.
Well, at least, now it worked, and you learned about yourself and what you like doing. And you've also, with that, you have started your own podcast.
I
So
have.
how did that come about?
Well, so that came about. All right. So when I first got out of the Marine Corps, or actually the second time I got out of the Marine Corps, just like many, many veterans out there, we lose that sense of camaraderie. We lose that sense of purpose. And a lot of people don't realize that if you sign your name on that dotted line, you have a servant's heart. So for me, I started, looking at avenues of ways to give back to the community and the veterans that serve our community, whether it be first responders or teachers or whatever. And so I started working or volunteering, not started working, but started volunteering at different veteran service organizations around my local area. And it helped with my night terrors and my PTSD. It didn't eliminate it, but it helped minimize. Like there's nights that I'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, sweating from head to toe and screaming. And my wife was like, "What's going on?" And as a civilian, I didn't think she would ever understand the things that I saw or the things that I went through. And so for me, volunteering and talking with other veterans and telling my story, I realized that I wasn't alone, and I wasn't going through the VA. I didn't go through the VA because I had a job that I had health insurance, and I was like, I don't need the VA. I'm not broken. Other veterans need it more than I do, like most normal veterans. So doing that, and then I got involved with an organization. And I was on the board with an organization here. I'm not going to say any names because it didn't end very well. Um, but got involved with an organization, and we were in the process of building a tiny home community for homeless veterans. It was my baby, my brainchild, that we needed something like that in our area. And while we were in the process of doing this, the founder of said organization, it was all about him. He didn't care about his board. It was all about him. So he was at first, when I first met him, it was like, oh man, this guy's doing amazing things. He's out helping veterans. And then the longer that I was involved, the more I saw that everything was about him. He was building his public profile. And um, when I resigned from the board, he canceled the project 2 months later. All we needed was funding. That's all we needed was funding. Now COVID did hinder that a little bit, because of wasn't able to fundraise and stuff. But he canceled the project and then wound up selling the property back to the person. So as a nonprofit, he made money off of it, which is not legal. So yeah, let's just say there's some things in the works. I'm not really going to go into too much detail on that, but there's things in the work. So when I left, the void was there again. I was like, I need something. I had talked about doing a podcast, because I watched, all these different veteran podcasts and stuff like that. And I'm like, I wonder how hard it would be to do that. So I started, buying the computer, the soundboard, the mics, everything that I needed. And 2 years later, February 28th, so coming up this month,
Oh, snap.
will be 1 year. It took me a little while to get. It took me a little while, like almost 2 years to start the podcast, and I was like, man, I need to do something. And then I've been doing it since. We started out doing one episode a week. On Sunday, we would record audio podcast, and then we would release it on Tuesday. And then as we progressed and we got into video podcasting, now I do two podcasts a week. I do Sunday, Monday, both live. So you can look at us on our YouTube channel, Facebook page. And then I also release audio still once a week, my audio side. So that still releases on Tuesday at noon. Um, and then that, but no, I love it, man. The people that I get to talk to, like with you, and what we focus on is veteran service organizations from around the country. And then we also bring in veteran business owners. We also bring in some veterans just to tell their story. Like when I had you on, I brought you on to tell your story because you are a veteran podcaster and you're out there focusing on strictly Marines, but you still have a story to tell as well. So that's kind of why we do what we do. And like I'm in the process right now. I had Veterans Villages on from Pennsylvania. They created a 47 unit veterans village. So it's like in an apartment building
Oh, wow.
that they put together like Lego blocks. So the units are built in a factory. They ship it to Pennsylvania, and then they use cranes and stack them like Lego blocks. So it's 47 units. It's pretty neat. So there's a organization called Lady Vets Connect here in Kentucky that already has a school that they refurbished for female veterans that have MST survivors or their abusive relationship. So it's just strictly female veterans that can't have families there. So Phyllis Abbott, who's one of the founders of Lady Vets Connect, she's like, "Hey, do you know how we can do this? Expand our footprint?" And I think she's got like 10 acres of land up there. And
Wow.
so what I did, I connected Dana Spain, who is the president and CEO of Veterans Villages, with Phyllis, and then now they're collabing on trying to get something, because they're going to expand so women and children can be up there, or families.
Oh,
So yeah, so I'm excited about that because veteran homelessness is something that I'm very passionate about, because there's too many of us on the streets. And it's just like, what do we do? So I got them connected. And then I had an interview with Michelle Black, who is a Gold Star widow. Her husband was a Green Beret that the Taliban killed, and there was video of it. So she wrote a book, but she's also going to DC and she's lobbying for veterans, um, or not just veterans, but military members that the chain of command has tried to railroad them, like his unit, like her husband's unit. They try to blame them for what happened. So Don Bramer, who is the founder or co-founder of the American Freedom Fund, he's also the owner of the Bramer Group in DC. He lobbies for veterans daily, so I got them connected together. So
And I think that's the part of podcasting, like being a good podcast host that people don't see and don't realize. Like, not only are you amplifying and telling these stories, but then you're going and connecting people and connecting more networks. And that's the piece of it, I think, that we don't often hear about.
right, right.
And
No, I
the
agree.
and the impact you're making. I mean, you talked, earlier about something that didn't work out and you had all this passion, you were wanting to do it, but now you're doing it tenfold, just in a little different of a way.
Yeah, different avenue. And it for me, it like I said earlier, it doesn't eliminate my PTS, it doesn't eliminate my night terrors, but it helps minimize. And like I don't need medicine to deal with my PTS and stuff. Now, I am hyper vigilant. I do I'm quick to anger sometimes, like my triggers. My wife and kids, let's go into that a little bit. My wife and kids, when I was married, the first time in the Marine Corps, I caught her cheating on me. That was my first wife. So after that, we got married October '99, separated January of 2000 because I caught her in bed with a squid. Yeah, I come back from Bridgeport, California, and caught her in bed with a squid. Um, so me and her separated. I got divorced after I got out the second time. My divorce was final. Got with my wife now, and so she saw some things early on with my PTS and stuff early on, but she stuck around. My daughters, I didn't have kids when I was in the military, so they didn't have to deal with daddy deploying. They didn't have to deal with when's daddy coming back? Is daddy coming back? Um, but they do deal with my PTS. They do deal with my hypervigilance. Prime example, I was at a restaurant the other day with the family, and I have to have my back to a wall facing the door. That's just how I have to be. Well, my daughter, my youngest, sat by one of our friends, and I was like, "Nope, you got to get up. That's my spot because that's where I already had picked where I was going to sit at because I knew where I was at." And I was like, "All right." So, they have to deal with that. But kids, it's very hard on them because they don't really understand. Um, they listen to some of my podcasts and they're slowly understanding, but they still don't understand. So,
And how has that been, because we talked about it a little bit earlier, but how has that been as a parent? I mean, there doesn't seem to really be resources out there for our children who didn't kind of live through it to see it. They see it, where we are
right.
years later. How, or are there any resources, or what have you personally done to try and kind of like bridge that gap, have those conversations? Because,
So,
now they're a little older, so you're having more conversations than obviously when they were young, but how
right.
is that?
So, like you said, there's not a whole lot of organizations out there that focuses on the family side. There's one down in Florida that I know of. It's called the Hope Project. It's a retired chaplain, David Trodgton. He has the Hope Project. He rescues horses, and then he also does equine therapy with veterans and their families, not just the veteran,
Oh,
but the families. So there are very few um, veteran service organizations that actually focus on the families. And for me, my kids, I didn't have kids when I was in, but there are veterans out there that mom or dad was deployed, and the kids are like, "Well, when's mom or dad coming back? Is mom and dad coming back?" Um, so like Michelle Black, I was just talking about her. She just started a new nonprofit that focuses on fallen soldiers' kids because they need it. They need it as much as you or I need the help. Even with parents, if you're deployed and you wind up dying overseas, mom and dad, they're distraught. They need to deal with that. So why not focus on the families of the fallen or veterans in general? Because my kids don't understand PTS. I mean, they see it, but they don't really understand it. They don't understand what daddy went through. Um, and it's one of those things. It's well needed out there that we need to focus on the veterans families as well. And so we're working on some things with other organizations to bring in, either equine therapy for children, um, which is a program with that organization that I was with that I'm not going to mention. That was something they did. Now that was, you had a clinical technician on site that was a psychologist, but also it was children led. So the person who started the foundation, his daughters ran that program, and she went to school for it, but she also sees it as well. So basically, what needs to happen is you get the kids of the veteran with other kids of veterans, and they start talking and say, well, my daddy does this, and then this kid can say, well, my daddy does the same thing. So it kind of works out that way. It's kind of just sitting there telling a story, and it helps them. So I think it needs to be done.
And especially like, and you just saying that too, because so often when people leave the military, they go back home or they go somewhere else that a lot of times, I mean, there's not as many military bases as you think. So often our kids are not in an environment where they are meeting other kids who went through that. So even
Right.
like you said, having those conversations is something that they're not really having. And I am not a doctor by any means, but me and my husband have both really like studied and looked at our trauma, and like, we're very concerned about generational trauma and our children carrying the impact of our trauma,
Hmm.
from us like not getting the help and the healing and the things we need. And so that's something that we have always, not always, but like as we transitioned and went through it, we realized, there's a lot of work that we need to do. And I think the other thing is like, you're not going to be perfect in this healing process, even with your family and your kids. And we have learned to say sorry so often,
Yeah.
because that's the thing. It's like, we are not going to be perfect. And we're going through this, right, as a family together. And it's hard. It's hard. I feel like we have so many more resources than like our children do.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And there's times that I snap at my kids, and and it's over stupid stuff. And here dad has to go back later and see them eye to eye and apologize and give them a hug and tell them that I'm sorry that I overreacted, or yeah, and like I said, it's over stupid shit. And literally, like, prime example, uh we go to church every Sunday, right? I want to leave at 10:45. Church don't start till 10 or 11:15. I have to be out the door at 10:45. And I got two daughters and a wife. So if they're not ready by 10:45, I'm like, bro, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, let's go, let's get out the door. I'm sitting in my truck. I'm getting heated because I'm like, bro, timeline. And it just, so I have to apologize. But they know when it's time to go to church, dad's ready to go, because I need to get into church. I need to get there, survey the situation, find the seats that I want. I have to sit on the end. I can't sit in the aisle. I have to sit closer to the front. That way, if something comes in, I can get them out the door because the exit's over here. So, and they understand that, but they don't really care because they're females and it takes them forever to get ready. So it's just one of those things. It's like, come on, bro, you got to do this. So
I think though, the thing that, and maybe you ask them, maybe you go back and ask them like from their childhood, do they remember the outburst more or the you apologizing? Because 9 times out of 10, I can almost guarantee that it's the not the fact, that my parent exploded on me or this. It was that after that,
Hmm.
even if it was a few hours later or whatever, so that the apology could be completely sincere, that's the moment that they remember.
Yeah.
That's the like thing that like, like, because I think about it all the time with like our kids, because our kids are, our oldest is 10. And so there's a lot, there's a lot of that young kids
Yeah.
cheese, right? Outburst. What is, what is something that you hope veterans, when it comes to like their mental health and seeking that, what is something that you hope that they get from your story, or that they know that they can do when they're seeking like this mental health in the transition?
So, so for me, one of my mottos is one veteran at a time. And what I mean by that is if you or I reach one veteran and I tell my story to this veteran and that veteran says, all right, I need to go get help. Um, so let me go back just to dial it back a little bit. I started going to the VA last year. So I'm in the process of doing my VA stuff now. I just had my first consult with the therapist, um, and I'm getting that process rolling. For me, what I want for veterans to understand about my story is I'm just like them. I've been through some. Everybody does things differently. Like your situation's different. Mine, their situation might be different than mine. But as long as you reach out and you talk to somebody and tell your story, it's going to help you. So one veteran at a time. If I help one veteran today, that veteran's going to turn around and help somebody else. Uh, and another thing is, I can look at you, Tab, and ask you how you're doing, and you're going to tell me you're fine. But then I'm going to look in your eyes and I'm going to ask you the next hard question. How are you really doing? Because then you're going to open up and you're going to be like, all right. So always ask that next hard question because you can always look in a person's eyes and see how they're actually doing because eyes tell the story. And I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, look, something's wrong. I know something's up. What's going on? And my wife right now, she's dealing with some stuff with her mom and so I can tell she'll tell me she's fine, but I know something's wrong. And it's just like I can automatically tell, like when I look at her and see in her eyes, I know something's wrong. Like I can be at work, be gone all day long, and not know what's going on here at home with her mom and the phone calls that she's having and stuff with and I come home, walk in the door, and I look at her, and I'm like, all right, what's wrong? And then she'll, I'm fine. No, babe, tell me what's really wrong. And that's what we need to do as veterans out there, because unfortunately, the reported number is 22 a day, but it's more like 40 something a day because a lot of times it doesn't get reported to the VA. There's too many brothers and sisters out there that are taking their own life because people are not asking that next hard question. Reach out. At least I got a whole phone full of people that I reach out to daily or weekly just to check in with them and talk with them because that's as a veteran, that's all we need. We just need somebody to talk to, and it could be anybody. So just reach out, talk to your friends, your brothers, your sisters that you served with, and check in on them and see how they're actually really doing. Don't just say how you doing. Oh, I'm fine. All right, and then leave it at that. No, ask that next hard question. So
Because I think asking that next question too, it shows like that additional like, no, we're not, like, no,
yeah,
no, that is just like the additional push that is needed. Before I ask the last question of the day, where can people connect with you, hear your podcast? When is your podcast? And then I'll ask you the last question.
awesome. So yeah, you can connect with me via my phone number 502-435-3515. That's 502-435-3515. You can find me on Facebook at so we have a public page called HomeFront Sitrep Podcast. We also have a private group which is just HomeFront Sitrep. You can find us on YouTube at Homefront Sit Rep. You can find us on Amazon, Spotify, anywhere you find your podcast at Homefront Sit Rep. So, and then we go live. Like I said, we go live on LinkedIn. We go live on Facebook, our public page, and also our YouTube channel. Sundays and Mondays. And then we also do a tip of the spear once a month. It's 5 veteran podcasters, and we're bringing in other veteran podcasters. Tab's the new one; she's coming in. She's going to join the team hopefully. So we're bringing in other veteran podcasters as well. And the tip of the spear, with Triple Threat Vets podcast, Misfit Nation podcast, Homefront Sitrep, I Am Pitts, the Decision Hour. Now we're adding the Oath We Took podcast to that as well. It's going to be the one of the newest members to the group. And you can find it on my YouTube channel, Facebook, wherever, Triple Threat, Misfit Nation, all of those guys, it'll be going live on their platforms as well. And what we do on that is we bring in guests, and we talk about, so like with this one that's coming up with this February 28th, we're going to have Dr. Teresa Larson as a guest. We're also going to have Carol Lee. This is the lady that you might want to talk to. Carol Lee, she's not a veteran, but she's got 2 Marine sons. One's been in for 13 years. The other one is stuck in Lima Company, which is the med board down in Paris Island, and he's getting screwed with rurally. So she's going to come on and talk about her situation that she's got. So it's going to be riveting because they've had a couple IGs written down. A gunny got demoted from gunny to sergeant because of the situation that's going on down there.
Oh, well, this is gonna be a fun isn't the right word. Sorry. Gonna be intriguing.
Very intriguing. So you can find us on, like I said, Tip of the Spear. It'd be on my face or YouTube. Triple Threats and Misfit Nation will be on all of our YouTubes, and they're all at 7:00 Eastern time. So it's exciting. I'm excited.
Awesome. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of David's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. His sacrifices matter. His stories matter. Not every Marine's story is the same. We didn't all join the military for the same reason. What is the same is the oath that we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.